Hey everybody, Pastor Marshall here. I know I'm a little bit in the dark because the beautiful Caribbean is behind me. Claudia and I, most of you know, are in the Bahamas with the company that's loaning our church some funds for our new building, and so we're at a retreat and a training, and it's going great. Well, this week we've been in Luke chapter 18, and so you might remember that I started my message by telling you a story about my friend Scott. He and his wife and a surprise vacation to Las Vegas. He comes back, and you remember, he was appalled. Of course, now I live on the West Coast, and Vegas is apparently a popular family vacation spot, so I can't very well ask you to tell a Vegas story. So I'm a little stumped as to how to get you to break the ice, but let's just stay on this subject. What has shocked you? Where have you gone and come back and been shocked? What is unacceptable to your conscience these days? Well, Paul found himself in Corinth, of course, and that was the Vegas of his day. Two major temples there, the temple to Venus, the temple to Apollos, female prostitutes for worship in the first, male prostitutes for worship in the second, roaming everywhere. This leads Paul to write in 1 Corinthians chapter 2 that when he came to Corinth, he was full of weakness and fear. Paul still, though, goes out and steps into the streets of Corinth and shares Christ. Do you think it is a better idea for us to share Christ out of weakness and fear, or out of calm and confidence? Are we better when we're weak and broken, or are we better when we're put together and confident? Next, for the first time in Acts, we read about Paul working to support his ministry as a tent maker. And then he stopped when Timothy and Silas came. We believe that there was an offering that they brought with them from Philippi. Now, without me in the room, what are the strengths of having a pastor that works to support himself and that he isn't paid by the church? What are the strengths of having a pastor that doesn't work outside of the church to support himself, but the church supports him? Do any of you have any experience of being a part of a church where the pastor worked outside of the church and the church didn't support him? What was that like? That's different than what we do at Lakeside Christian. Next, it says in verse 11 that Paul was in Corinth for a year and a half, but Luke records just a little bit about it. Why do you think that is? Paul receives a message from Jesus directly in this passage to encourage him. It's the reason that I wanted to preach on this passage. It's a red letter edition. And he receives this message because he's afraid. He's rightly afraid now. He was in nicer places, and he was beaten, and he was flogged, and he was stoned, and now he's in Corinth. How has God encouraged you during tough times in your life? For example, I did have to work when the church started struggling that Claudia and I started. The church was having trouble paying its bills. Claudia and I, we were the biggest bill, so the church couldn't afford to pay us, and so I had to go out and work so that we could pay our bills, and there were certainly times that we were afraid. We didn't know if we were going to make it. And then God would surprise us. It was like the game of Monopoly. You remember the community chest cards, and there would be a bank error in your favor, or a rebate would arrive, or birthday money would come, gifts would be given, the electric bill would give us a refund instead of charging us. God encouraged us so many times. How has He encouraged you when you were afraid? Finally, Luke does record one very important thing that happened in Corinth, besides the red letters. Gallio, who was a proconsul, that makes him kind of equivalent to a Supreme Court justice in our world today. And Gallio declares that Christianity is a part of Judaism. He says to the Jews, you have to handle this. This is an internal conflict. You handle the Paul situation. But in so doing, in claiming that Christianity was just a part of Judaism, at this part in Christian history, Christianity becomes legal. And it will stay legal for about 10 to 12 years, until Nero, who is emperor, and he's the only one that can overrule a proconsul, the emperor will declare Christianity illegal. Some of you might find it interesting to know that Nero's wife at the time, or his most popular wife at the time, he had more than one, was a Jewess. And so she might have been talking into his ear. How do you think that you would behave if Christianity was illegal today? Well, every week I challenge you to talk about what you like, what was your favorite thing in the story, and what did you not like. I like that Jesus shows up. My mentor used to always tell me, God is seldom early, but he's never late. And I see that in this story. What do I not like? Well, I feel bad for Sosthenes. I think you feel bad for him too. First day on the job, and he gets beat up, and the court doesn't even stop it. Well, finally, your application. I want to challenge you this week to step out in fear, to live in fear and trust that God is with you like Paul did, and just have confidence that in our weakness, he makes us strong. Well, I hope that you have a great group, and I will be back in town next weekend for the next step in the book of Acts. God bless.